Max Turner was a photographer known for his keen eye and his ability to capture the soul of a moment. His work graced the covers of magazines and filled art galleries across the country. But his latest project, a series of black and white photographs capturing the essence of forgotten places, was about to take him down a path darker than any he'd ever imagined. As he traveled from town to town, photographing abandoned buildings, desolate landscapes, and empty streets, Max began to notice something strange in his pictures. A figure, barely visible at first, started appearing in his shots. A blurred, shadowy form that seemed to grow clearer with each new roll of film he developed. The figure wasn't there when he took the photos, but it haunted every frame. Determined to uncover the truth, Max found himself on a terrifying journey into the unknown. It began with a simple shot of an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of a small town. Max had arrived just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the decaying structure. He snapped a few pictures, capturing the eerie beauty of the place. It wasn't until he developed the film in his dark room that he noticed the figure. At first, it was nothing more than a blur in the background, easily dismissed as a trick of the light. But something about it bothered Max. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, watching him. He returned to the house the next day, but it was as empty as before. Yet, when he developed the new roll of film, the figure appeared again, this time closer. As Max continued his work, the figure appeared in more and more of his photographs. It was always there, lurking in the background, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to be following him from place to place. Max began to obsess over the images, spending hours in his darkroom, studying the ghostly figure. He reached out to the locals in the towns he visited, asking if they recognized the figure or knew of any ghost stories associated with the places he photographed. Most dismissed his questions, but a few shared tales of tragedy and loss, stories of people who had died in those very locations, their spirits said to linger. One old man, a retired history teacher, told Max of a young woman who had disappeared many years ago. Her body was never found, but it was said that she had been seen wandering near the old house, the same house Max had first photographed. Her name was Emily, and she was believed to have been murdered by her lover, who then took his own life. But her spirit, it seemed, had never found peace. The figure in Max's photographs grew more distinct with each passing day. No longer a blur, it now resembled a woman, her face pale and her eyes hollow. She seemed to be reaching out to him, her presence becoming more menacing with every new picture he took. Max began to hear strange noises in his apartment, footsteps in the hall when no one was there, whispers in the dead of night. His once peaceful darkroom became a place of terror. The temperature would drop suddenly, and the lights would flicker. Once, as he was developing a new batch of photos, the power went out completely, plunging the room into pitch darkness. When the lights returned, the newly developed photographs were scattered across the floor, each one marred by scratches that formed words. "Find me." Max was now certain that the spirit in his photographs was real and that she was trying to communicate with him. But what did she want, and why was she haunting him? Desperate for answers, Max returned to the small town where he had first photographed the house. He spent hours in the local library, poring over old newspapers and records, searching for any mention of Emily and her tragic fate. His research led him to a forgotten article, buried deep in the archives, which mentioned a hidden room in the old house, a room where Emily was rumored to have been kept before her death. Max knew he had to go back to the house. Armed with a flashlight and his camera, he entered the crumbling structure once more. The atmosphere inside was suffocating, the air thick with dust and the stench of decay. He moved through the house carefully, his heart pounding in his chest, until he found what he was looking for, a hidden door, concealed behind a rotting bookshelf. The door creaked open to reveal a small windowless room. The walls were covered in old faded wallpaper, and in the center of the room was a single chair, its wood splintered and worn. Max raised his camera and took a picture, the flash briefly illuminating the room. But when he checked the viewfinder, his blood ran cold. Emily's ghost was there, sitting in the chair, her eyes locked onto his. Max felt a chill run down his spine as the temperature in the room plummeted. The ghostly figure of Emily began to materialize in front of him, her form becoming more solid with each passing second. Her eyes were filled with sorrow and anger, and her lips moved as if she were trying to speak, but no sound came out. Max tried to back away, but the door slammed shut behind him, trapping him in the room with the spirit. He could feel her pain, her desperation. She wanted him to help her, to free her from the torment she had endured for so long. But how? What did she need from him? The answer came to him in a sudden flash of understanding. The photographs. She had been trying to reach out to him through the photographs, guiding him to this place. She wanted him to tell her story, to bring her tragic fate to light so that she could finally rest in peace. With trembling hands, Max took one final picture, capturing the sorrow in Emily's eyes. As the flash went off, the room was filled with a blinding light, and Max heard a faint whisper, "Thank you." When Max returned to his darkroom, he developed the final roll of film, his hands still shaking from the encounter. The photograph he had taken in the hidden room was unlike any of the others. Emily's ghost was there, but she was no longer the shadowy figure that had haunted his previous images. Her face was clear, her expression one of peace and gratitude. Max knew what he had to do. He published the photographs along with Emily's story, revealing the truth about her death and the hidden room where she had been kept. The story made headlines, and soon the old house was declared a historical site, a place where people could come to remember the tragic young woman who had died there. After the publication of the photographs, the hauntings stopped. Max no longer saw Emily in his pictures, and the strange occurrences in his apartment ceased. He continued his work, but he never forgot the ghost in the photograph. Years later, Max visited the old house one last time. It had been restored and turned into a small museum dedicated to Emily's memory. As he stood in the room where he had taken the final picture, he felt a sense of closure. Emily had found peace, and so had he. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye, a faint reflection in the window. It was Emily, smiling softly at him, before fading into the light of the setting sun. Max knew then that she would always be a part of his life, a reminder of the power of photography to capture not just images, but the very essence of the human soul.